Okay, let's talk about something kind of important here. Let's talk about the difference between what's called the degree of a term versus the degree of a polynomial or binomial, trinomial, etc., etc., etc. So the degree of a term means the degree of one a monomial or a term, and the degree of a polynomial meaning a binomial, trinomial, quadrinomial, quintinomial, yada, 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 yada. So let's start with the degree of a term. The degree of a term is a fancy way of declaring the hierarchy of terms within something. And it's, how do we measured it, measured? Let's write the definition first, then we'll explain it. Measured by the sum being, of course, the word for addition, the sum of all exponents in the term, exponents of variables, the exponents of the variables in a term. There's our definition. So we'll use that. Measured by the sum of all exponents of the variables in a term. So let's look at a monomial. Let's look at a term. Let's look at just simply 2x. So how many variables do we have in that term? We just have one. And if I ask you, what is the exponent in that x? Well, it's not written, but it actually is the number 1. So when I say, what is the degree of the term 2x, we would say, so the term and its degree, we would say the degree of this one has a degree value of 1. If I look at the number 4x squared, there's one term, right? 4 times x, that's one term. What is its degree? Well, the exponent is, or the variable, excuse me, is x. Where'd my marker go? Why is my marker not working today? And therefore, if I look at the exponent that's attached to that, the exponent being 2, then the degree of that particular term is 2. If I think of the number 3, right? And remember, the degree of a term is measured on the sum of the exponents of all exponents. And since the number 3 is just the number 3, it's like a constant, it doesn't have a variable, and therefore we would say its degree is 0. Finally, if I said negative 3xyz, that's one term because it's negative 3 times x times y times z, the product of numbers or variables. That's one term. It's a monomial. And if I think about those variables that exist within that, that x has a value of 1, that y has a value of 1, exponents, excuse me. So really, there are 3 invisible ones there. Oh, I went too far. 3 invisible ones. Lost my page. So therefore, its degree, I'll use red instead. 3 invisible ones. Its degree would be 3, even though those ones weren't recorded. They still have exponents of 1, and therefore the degree of that monomial or that term would be 3. Now, if we juxtapose that to the degree of a polynomial, the degree of a polynomial, meaning a binomial, trinomial, more than 3 term, the degree of a polynomial, and I'm going to put is not determined, and I'll quadruple underline not. The degree of a polynomial is not determined by the sum of all variable exponents, all exponents of variables, comma, but rather the degree of the term, of the highest term, of the highest degree term, the degree of the highest degree term, the degree of the highest degree term. Oh my heavens, that's wordy. Degree of a polynomial is not determined by the sum of all exponents, and we'll highlight, but not determined by the sum of all exponents of the variables within that polynomial, but rather the degree of the highest degree term. It makes much more sense when I show you an example. So let's look at a polynomial. So again, we can't just use one term. We're going to use 2, 3, or 4 terms. So let's just take a simple x plus 1. There are 2 terms. So we'll use this one as our expression or our polynomial. Will the degree of the actual degree of polynomial. So we think about this one here. The exponent of on the x, the variable only, the constants don't count. The unwritten invisible exponent on that x is 1. And this second term, so there's one term, there's a second term. Those are binomial, right? That 1 has no variable, therefore it's not a part of our degree conversation. X has the highest degree of the two terms that are in there, so therefore the degree of the polynomial will just be the number 1. If I say x squared plus y, now things get a little interesting. This is also a binomial. There's two terms. I'll highlight it green, one term, two terms. The degree of the x squared, since it's the exponent that determines the degree, it's 2. The y has an invisible 1. So some people will say the degree of that binomial is 3. But remember, it is not determined by the sum of all the exponents, but the degree of the term that has the highest degree. So there are two terms here. This one has a degree of 2. This one has a degree of 1. So therefore, the degree of that binomial is simply the highest degree term, or 2. Let's continue on. Let's look at a trinomial this time. Let's look at negative 4x to the exponent of 4 minus x squared plus 3. There we have a trinomial. This term within our trinomial has a degree of what? Well, it's the exponent, so it has a degree of 4. This term has a variable of x with an exponent of 2. And this term is just a constant. There's no variable, so it has a degree of 0. Of those three terms, 4, 2, and 0, the highest is 4. So therefore, the whole trinomial simply has a degree of 4. Well, that's so interesting, isn't it? Let's try a trick question. Let's give you a 4-term polynomial. Let's give you negative 10 plus x minus 3xy plus 4x. Let's go with x squared y squared z. So again, it's 4 terms, 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms, 4 terms. Since we don't have a quadrinomial, we're just going to call that a polynomial. This has a degree of 0. This has a degree of 1. This has a degree of what? 2 invisible 1s for exponents, a degree of 2. And this one has a degree of 2 plus another 1, a degree of 5. The degree of this 4-termed polynomial is not 8, but it is the degree of the highest term. So therefore, the whole degree of that polynomial will just be the number 5. Okay. So to differentiate 1 term versus 2 terms, this has a degree as a monomial or as a single term of, well, there's a 1 here and a 1 here, as a degree of 2. This one has a degree of, this term here has a degree of 2. This one here has a degree of 1. So this whole expression, the highest degree term is 2, so therefore just 2.